Welcome back to Haunt Narratives. Today we're diving into a really dark chapter of American true crime. I mean, the names, right? Henry Lee Lucas,
Yeah.
Ottis Toole.
Yeah, these two are something else. This isn't just your typical serial killer story. They left a trail of carnage that spans states, decades, and honestly, it left behind this tangled web of confessions and contradictions and, it's just unanswered questions.
Lucas, he earned the name the Confession Killer,
Hmm.
claimed responsibility for over 600 murders. 600.
Yeah, it's a number that just stops you in your tracks, and honestly, it raises red flags immediately. He was convicted, yeah, for the murders of his mother and a couple of others, but the real extent. I mean, how many murders he actually committed, it's still debated, hotly debated to this day.
And then there's Toole, another convicted killer. He gets pulled into Lucas's orbit, and together they painted this absolutely horrifying picture of, a murderous rampage across the entire country. The question is, were they really the prolific serial killers they claimed to be?
And that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today. We're going to separate fact from fiction, try to get into the heads of these guys, the dark psychology that fueled what they said was this reign of terror.
Right, so to try to understand how they became the monsters they allegedly became, we need to first look at their childhoods. Both Lucas and Toole really endured horrific abuse and trauma.
Lucas's childhood, it's almost like a textbook case of, how to create a monster. His own mother forced him to watch her prostitution, really beat him constantly. He lost an eye because of an infection that she just completely ignored. And he even said she forced him to dress like a girl, to cross-dress when he was a child.
God, it's just, how can someone be so cruel?
Right. And Toole's story, it's not much better. Abusive mother, forced into girls' clothes, sexually abused by his relatives, his own sister. There are rumors that he was exposed to satanic rituals.
We're not trying to make excuses for what they did, obviously. But to understand why they went down this path, the twisted paths they chose, we have to look at where it all started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crucial. And they both started showing signs of really disturbing behavior from a young age. We're talking arson, cruelty to animals. Lucas even said he committed his first murder when he was only 14 years old. Said he strangled a girl named Laura Burnsley.
God.
Yeah. He did later recant that confession, but, it gives you a glimpse into his psyche,
Yeah, for sure. And then when he was 23, he killed his own mother. Stabbed her during an argument.
Can you imagine not only enduring a horrific childhood, but then taking a life, even if it's your own mother's?
He claimed it was self-defense, but served 10 years for it. And then, as if drawn together by some evil force, Lucas and Toole met. They met at a soup kitchen in Florida in 1976.
That connection, and it was most likely a sexual one, it forged this dark bond between them that unleashed what they claim anyway, this wave of terror across the country. They preyed on the most vulnerable people, hitchhikers, sex workers, transients, anyone they thought wouldn't be missed.
The details of their crimes, or at least the ones they claim to have committed, they're the stuff of nightmares. Toole especially. He reportedly enjoyed the suffering of his victims, even allegedly engaged in cannibalism.
It's hard to wrap your head around that level of depravity, but we have to remember we're talking about allegations here. And the line between what's real and what they made up, it's about to get very blurry.
So let's get into Lucas's confessions. This is where things take a really, really weird turn. He was already incarcerated, and he starts confessing to, get this, hundreds of unsolved murders. And of course, this got the attention of law enforcement. Who wouldn't want to close all those cases?
Exactly. So they formed the Lucas Task Force, a special unit, I guess you could say, dedicated to investigating his claims. And for a while, it seemed like they had hit the jackpot, like they were solving case after case.
But there were problems, right?
Yeah, lots of problems. Many of his confessions just didn't add up. They contradicted his known whereabouts, and people started getting suspicious. Was he being fed information, coached even? Were they practically forcing him to confess?
Wait, you're saying they were rewarding him for confessing to these horrible crimes? Giving him special treatment, maybe even manipulating him?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It's a disturbing one, for sure. They gave him all sorts of privileges, let him see case files, took him out to restaurants. He even seemed to know police codes. It raises some serious concerns about the way the task force was operating, Their methods, their ethics. It was a mess, really. You have all this pressure to close cases, and then you have Lucas, who seems like he's willing to confess to, anything. It's a recipe for disaster. I mean, you're practically guaranteeing misinformation.
So eventually the truth came out.
Yeah. Investigative journalists, especially from the Dallas Times-Herald, they started digging into Lucas's stories, and they found holes, inconsistencies, started raising doubts about the way the task force was doing things.
Was he lying? I mean, was Lucas was he a master manipulator? Was he playing everyone?
Well, that question, it's still a big part of this case, you know? Even though a lot of his confessions were proven false, there are people who believe some of them might be true. It's a real tangled mess of fact and fiction, and separating the two, it's almost impossible.
And Lucas, even when he died in prison in 2001, he still said he wasn't a serial killer. I don't know, he wanted to have it both ways. Like, he wanted the notoriety without, actually taking responsibility for the crimes.
It's fascinating, isn't it, the psychology of it all? I mean, the darkness that drove him to commit these acts, and then on top of that, create these elaborate stories around them. It shows you just how good the human mind is at deception, especially when you're looking at a lifetime in prison.
Let's not forget about Toole, though. I mean, his crimes they're just as bad, if not worse.
Oh, absolutely. He was convicted of setting a fire that killed a man named George Sonnenberg, got the death penalty for it, but it was later commuted to life in prison.
And that's just one crime.
Yeah, he had other convictions for murder, at least 6, and he admitted to even more. But the case that most people remember, the most notorious one, is the Adam Walsh case.
God, that case. It was horrific. A 6-year-old boy abducted from a shopping mall, then murdered. Every parent's worst nightmare.
Toole actually confessed to Adam's murder, gave really graphic details that seemed to, point to his involvement. But later, of course, he recanted, just like so many of his other confessions.
And the police, they messed up. They lost crucial evidence. Toole's car, a machete that could have been used in the crime. It adds another level of tragedy to an already awful story.
Yeah. And it wasn't until 27 years later that the police officially closed the case. They said Toole did it, despite him recanting and the lack of physical evidence.
This case, it really shows how important it is for law enforcement to be thorough, especially when a child's life is involved. It's a reminder, a really sad reminder, about what can happen when mistakes are made, when evidence is mishandled.
And it also makes you wonder, was Toole really responsible? Or was this confession, was it another lie, another attempt to, to get attention, or maybe to manipulate the system just like Lucas did?
We have these two guys, right? Like Lucas, the self-proclaimed confession killer, and Toole, a convicted murderer who loved to give gruesome details. And their story, it's not just about the crimes, it's about the way the media covered it, the way the public became, obsessed with serial killers. And it changed the way we look at criminal justice.
Yeah. I mean, their case really highlighted how confessions can be unreliable, how investigators can get tunnel vision, and how important it is to really get to the truth, not just get a conviction.
It makes you think, right? How many other cases might be based on false confessions? How many people are in prison because investigators just wanted to close the case, to give families closure? How many innocent people are paying the price for all of this?
It's a scary thought, really, but it's something we need to think about. We can't just take the official story as fact. We need to think critically, Look for evidence. Consider different viewpoints, and then maybe we can get a little closer to the truth.
It's a story that's been told and retold. I mean, there are documentaries, books, even a movie, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. People are fascinated by them, by serial killers, by, the darkest parts of human nature, I guess.
Yeah. But it's more than just entertainment, right? It's a cautionary tale. The Lucas and Toole case shows us how easy it is to get things wrong, how the system, the justice system, can be manipulated.
It makes you wonder, how many other cases out there, how many are based on false confessions? How many innocent people are in prison because of this? Because investigators were so focused on getting a conviction.
Yeah, it's unsettling. But I think it also shows us how important it is to be skeptical, to not just take things at face value. We need to question, look for proof, consider different sides of the story.
Especially now, right? With all the information out there, it's hard to know what's real and what's not. We're bombarded with these sensationalized headlines all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to see the nuances, the facts.
Yeah. It's a skill, though, being able to tell what's true and what's not. And it's a skill we all need to work on. We can't just blindly accept everything we read or hear.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, this look into the lives of Henry Lee Lucas and Ottis Toole, What can we take away from all of this?
Well, their story, it's this mix of truth and lies, of horrible acts and calculated deception. It forces us to really look at ourselves,
Yeah.
at the dark side of humanity. It makes us realize that the monsters we're so afraid of, they might not be hiding in the shadows. They might be right in front of us, manipulating us, tricking us.
It's unsettling, to
Yeah.
say the least. I mean, were these guys really monsters who committed all these crimes? Or were they just, I don't know, victims of their own pasts who figured out how to play the system?
It's a question that we might never have a definitive answer to, and that's disturbing. Their story is this open wound, this stain on our justice system. It reminds us that tunnel vision is dangerous, that false confessions happen, and that our goal should always be justice, not just putting someone behind bars.
Their story, well, it's a story that will stay with you. It makes you question everything, right? It makes you wonder about guilt and innocence. And it reminds us to never stop asking questions, to never stop looking for the truth, even when it's scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Until next time on Haunt Narratives, try to keep those lights on. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones who look just like us.